Hi guys, it's Monday. I hope everybody had a good Mother's Day weekend and you got to spend some quality time with your mothers. I realize we're still in lockdown, it's still the pandemic, but thank goodness for things like Skype and FaceTime, and we still get a chance to connect with our family. So hopefully everybody took advantage of that, and let's get on with the show. Hi guys, welcome back to Waxing On. It's Monday, so that means it's jazz today. And today we're going to look at one of the legendary trumpet players of my generation, Freddie Hubbard. Now, I first became aware of Freddie Hubbard, I'm going to say it was in the mid-70s. I was reading Downbeat a lot. I mean, it was my main source of information about jazz and instrumental players. It was because of Downbeat that I started checking out people like Clark Terry, Dizzy Gillespie, Freddie Hubbard, Miles Davis, Don Ellis, all of these great players. Now, around this time, Miles had been winning a lot of the polls. We had readers' polls, and we had the professional, critics' polls. But I often just looked at the readers' polls because, it's the man in the street that's deciding those. And Freddie started taking over and was beating out Miles. So I thought, well, maybe I should check him out. I really wasn't that familiar with him. So my exposure was in the mid-70s. So all of the work he had done from the 60s up until then, I really wasn't aware of. So I went out, and my first Freddie Hubbard album was this one, Keep Your Soul Together. Okay, and it was on Creed Taylor Records. If you remember, we talked about Creed Taylor quite a few months ago, probably well into the last summer. And we had a couple of specific Creed Taylor albums that I talked about, one being Diodato, and the other was Bob James. And surprisingly, these two albums are two of the top viewed albums I have in this whole series. Now, I'm not going to say it's because it was on Creed Taylor's records or whatever, but I'll tell you, Creed Taylor knew how to pick players, he knew how to show them off, and a lot of times he had a great concept for them. He used a lot of studio musicians, and he really put out some great albums. This was at the time when we were getting out of the pure jazz and more into jazz rock idiom. This one, again, it was not a lot of large band music on it. It was basically just a small group with Freddie. We had Freddie Hubbard on trumpet, George Cables on piano, Ron Carter playing bass, drums were Ralph Penland, guitar Oriel Ray, and tenor saxophone Junior Cook. And only 4 tunes on here. Recorded at Rudy Van Gelder's studios, and again, that studio maybe turned out some great material as well. These all produced by Creed Taylor. An excellent album. I found it was a great place to start. It was very accessible. And again, kind of in that jazz rock idiom. Now, I did pick up some other ones, but the one I'm going to show you now is just called the Baddest Number. It was kind of like a greatest hits on CTI. And just to give you an idea of the kind of roster he was carrying, people that were helping out on this album: Herbie Hancock, Ron Carter, Billy Cobham, George Benson, Keith Jarrett, Airto, Hubert Laws, Jack DeJohnette. It's a who's who of musicians that are backing up Freddie on this. Now this one, again, it's a greatest hits album kind of. We got Red Clay. That was one of his big hits way back when he first started out on CTI. He had an album called that. We've got In a Mist, First Light, and Here's That Rainy Day. So more traditional jazz. And one of the albums, I'm just looking, or one of the songs, looking to see where it is. The one In a Mist. Here's who we had. We had Don Sebesky doing the arranging, Freddie on trumpet, Ron Carter on bass, Billy Cobham on drums, George Benson doing piano or guitar, Keith Jarrett on piano, Airto, Hubert Laws on flute, Alan Rubin, Marvin Stamm on trumpet and flugelhorn, Wayne Andre and Garnet Brown on trombone. These are those same studio musicians we talked about in New York. And again, got a lot of work through Creed Taylor's operation and did some excellent work on here. One that I found interesting, I'm just going to try and spot it for you here. One of the songs. There it is, Red Clay. Excuse me. Freddie, Herbie Hancock, Ron Carter, Lenny White on drums. Who's playing percussion? Ed Shaughnessy. Can you imagine? The Tonight Show drummer playing percussion for Freddie Hubbard on this one. So not the main drummer, but still getting himself in there and helping out. Joe Henderson on tenor sax. And again, CTIs, some great material there. If you're new to Freddie Hubbard and you want something that's quite accessible, a lot of great players, any of the CTI albums are a good place to start. Now, people thought Freddie had kind of sold out at this point because he was doing like the more jazz rock instead of the pure jazz, like maybe with Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers. But he continued off. He went to Columbia, and things just got a little more commercial. I have one of the Columbia albums here called Super Blue with Freddie. And this is one of those that actually features Freddie Hubbard model trumpet made by Colicchio. I only mention that because Colicchio was a big name back in Los Angeles in the older days. A lot of studio musicians were playing it. It was handmade instruments. And over the years, after Dominic passed away, they went through different hands. The last one was John Duda that was actually making the horns for them. And John just recently passed away. At this point, he was working independently, just himself, making trumpets. And it was probably the last of the Colicchio line. I don't believe anybody's taken it over since then. So if you have one, take good care of it because that may be the last of the line. I was lucky to get one of John's back in, I'm going to say about 2006. He made one for me, and I'll tell you, it's just an excellent horn. Anyways, on this one, a lot of originals. Super Blue or Ladyship, Take It to the Ozone, Gospel Truth, theme for Kareem, Sure as Things Can Change. What's significant on here is he still kept some excellent musicians with him. We've got Hubert Laws on flutes, Joe Henderson on tenor sax, Ron Carter still there playing bass, Kenny Barron on keyboards, George Benson guitar. Just an excellent, and Jack DeJohnette was still playing drums on this. So again, some excellent musicians backing him up on this one for Super Blue from about 1978. Now, one of the last Freddie Hubbard albums I bought was this one. And it's not as glitzy. It's more kind of back to, I don't want to even say his original style. It's just more acoustic sounding. And it's Freddie Hubbard live at the North Sea Jazz Festival in 1980. And this one's on Pablo Records. And if you remember back when we talked about Dizzy Gillespie, the Pablo label had also put out a number of albums. And one of them featured Oscar Peterson's group and 3 trumpet players, Dizzy, Clark Terry, and Freddie Hubbard. I believe it's called Trumpet Summit. And you may have checked that out if you had watched the Dizzy Gillespie episode. But it was a great one where these 3 trumpet players were taking turns and playing over the different songs, and you can just hear the unique style each player had. Now this one, there are a couple of Creed Taylor songs on here. First Light was from one of the Creed Taylor albums. One of a Kind, One of Another Kind, The Summer Knows, kind of a traditional. Impressions, Happiness Is Now, and the classic Red Clay. And for this one, he's got a very small, stripped-down group. I mean, it's just touring band. It's not like a studio recording. Freddie Hubbard on trumpet, David Schindler on tenor sax, Billy Childs on keyboard, Larry Klein bass, and Sinclair Lott on drums. So not a lot of those big names in there, but a good working band. It's a 2-album set on Pablo, and I don't know if Pablo's still putting out much. I really haven't picked up a lot of albums recently to see what they had, but they did have some classic pairings. I remember with the Oscar Peterson, there was one with Roy Eldridge, one with Count Basie, the Trumpet Summit. A lot of great stuff to check out. So you can find any of the old Pablo albums. They're worth taking a look at. So that was it. Those are my collection of Freddie Hubbard albums. Not back into the early days when he was playing with Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, or when he first started out, but starting in the 70s when he was first experimenting with that more commercial sound. And certainly any of the Creed Taylor albums, you can't go wrong. And I'm going to say that regarding whoever were on the labels. I mean, he did do albums for Hubert Laws, Ron Carter, all these guys on their own as well. but he just had a way of putting it together and making it interesting, making it very accessible for people, and making it commercially successful while still being true to the performer. So if you get a chance, check it out. Freddie Hubbard, one of the great trumpet players of the last 60 years. Thanks for stopping by. We'll see you on Wednesday when it's Classic Rock.